Hello, everyone. Welcome to Machip Tonight. Please, that's enough. I am your host, Samantha Loney. I am Métis. I know we have some First Nations listening tonight. I love First Nations communities. Actually, to be honest, I wanted to be First Nations. Yeah, that's true. But I just wasn't Inuit. Okay, rough crowd. On today's show, we're going to be talking about identity and music that connects Métis people to their identity. Something that differentiates the Métis people from First Nations communities. Which brings me to our first guest. You ready for her? I don't think you are. Okay. Here she is. Let's make some noise for our first guest, the #1 pop star in the world, Anna Métis. Hello, Anna.
Hi.
You're a little sweetie pie, aren't you? How old are you?
14.
14, and already the face of Métis people everywhere? I heard you still attend high school. How do your friends treat you, knowing you're Métis?
None of my friends know.
How are you able to hide your heritage so well?
Well, I kind of blend in. I don't look like what people expect an Indigenous person to look like. I have light skin.
Thank you, colonialism.
I still get to participate in ceremony and bead and enjoy all the other gifts my Indigenous ancestors have given me.
What's so funny?
It's just being Métis. I get to have the best of both worlds, which is the name of my next single.
Would you like to perform it for us? Come on, everybody. Would you like to hear Anna Métis' new single, Best of Both Worlds? Hello, my name is Samantha Loney, and welcome to the Traveling Métis podcast, a podcast designed to explore Métis culture. This is the 4th episode in the series. So, if you are completely lost as to who Métis people are or what the heck is going on, please check out the other episodes in the series. But if you missed it, don't worry. We have a great episode scheduled today. Today's episode is all about Métis music. We have podcaster Nika Pazuik on the show, along with Métis country musician Donny Parenteau, and a lot of fiddle music. Listen to that theme song, beautifully composed by Etienne Beausoleil, the musical director for the podcast, and the genius behind that opening Hannah Montana parody. A big conversation Etienne and I had when working on the show was, how do we incorporate the traditional Métis sound while infusing modern Métis music? Of course, you have to include the fiddle, which has taken the spotlight in Métis music since the beginning of our people's existence. But now it's time to set the fiddle aside. Not really. We'll be discussing it in a minute. No disrespect. We had a lot of conversations about what Métis music is. How has it transformed from the early days of the Red River Jig to taking over the country music scene and beyond? To start off this deep dive, I decided to talk to Indigenous 150 Plus podcaster and fellow Métis, Nika Pazuik. If Nika's voice sounds familiar, it's because we've had her on the show before.
Métis means that we walk two worlds, so the European way and the First Nations way. And I feel like we truly are like the bridge for a lot of different communities. And to me, being Métis means like walking in a good way and walking with love and balance and knowing that I carry a lot of my ancestors' hard work on my back.
What makes Nika an expert on Métis music? She interviewed two Métis musicians on the Indigenous 150 Plus podcast, fiddler Brianna Lizotte and country superstar Tegan Gaze. We encourage you to check those out, and we'll leave a link in the show notes. But first, listen to our conversation on what Métis music is and the unique perspective Métis people bring to music. So you interviewed both Tegan Gaze and Brianna Lizotte on Indigenous 150 Plus. So I consider you an expert in Métis music.
So Métis music is so broad. I interviewed Brianna Lizotte. She's a famous Métis fiddler in Alberta. I grew up with her too, which is unique. But that's very traditional Métis music, the fiddle, right? You know, playing rubber dolly, the Red River Jig, very traditional. Learning the origins of the Métis music is really unique. And then I interviewed Tegan Gaze, who is like a Métis country singer in BC, in the Okanagan area. And like, that's very modern Métis music, I would say, and very pop culture almost. And I think the most important thing is like, because there's such different genres and such different people, like I think it's the energy that you put into your music that really like highlights that you're Métis. Like you're putting like good intentions. It's almost like a ceremony of prayer, I would say. Like it's like you walk with that good way and you like that translates to their music and their career. I love hearing Métis artists. I think that, again, we kind of bridge that gap where we're not overly traditional and we can modernize a little bit. And I think that's really fun. Brianna, she's also coming out with like some modern stuff and learning how to introduce drums and bass and different things like that. And that's what she wants. Like her goal is to make it so that it's not the same songs that we're listening to over and over again. When you go to a Métis festival, it's like new music and it's kind of more fun and growing up with the new generation, I think.
When you listen to country music, you can kind of like feel, especially in Canada, like the influence of like Métis music, because the fiddle is a big part of country music. And
anytime I hear fiddle, I'm like, oh, that's me. I hear a fiddle going and I'm like, oh, that's me. I get so excited. But I think it's like a lot of country music, like that's kind of ways that Métis people have kind of modernized their music a little bit and kind of grown and shifted. And usually there's like a fiddle in there somewhere, or like you can like the foot tapping, even like the spoons, even, you know, I'm like, oh, this is us.
Let's talk about that unique perspective that Métis people do have on the world. We're talking about like two-eyed seeing, right?
Two-eyed seeing. So I think it's like probably the most important thing about being a Métis person is that we look at everything from two sides, the positives and negatives on both sides. And you're kind of able to walk in that way and understand both worlds and the struggles that come with being Métis, like coming as, you know, someone who's also like half settler and half Métis. Like I see a lot of the controversy of, am I Métis enough? Or even like, can I participate in ceremony? Can I, or should I only be tied with my white ancestry? And I think that two-eyed seeing makes it so that we know that it's not black and white. We know that it's not yes or no, and that it's not so clear of an answer, and that there's always going to be that gray. And we kind of almost look for that gray, because being Métis means you're like right in the middle. Being Métis means you're that like weird mix mutt that people always overlook, but I think our opinion matters and it's very valuable.
Maybe we'll talk a bit about because Métis people's role in like reconciliation, because we are able to see those two worlds and just sort of that like, how do we make it so everybody can kind of get along, and like, because we're all here already, like you can't really go and undo the past, right? So it's like, how do we as Métis people try to participate in reconciliation? Like, okay, like we are from these two worlds, how are we able to like make reconciliation truly happen, right? Because like we're kind of like walking like we embody kind of
we honestly like
yeah,
we are reconciliation. We are we're like the product of like the potential that like the coming of settlers to Canada could have been a really like beautiful thing and a very amazing experience, and the coming of a beautiful culture. And it obviously didn't go that way. Of course, there are Métis people, but it didn't go the way that I think both parties foresaw. And as Métis people, I think we look at it unique because like we can't say like the settlers coming was the worst thing ever, because then we wouldn't exist, right? Like we can't say like, oh, turn those ships around, you never should have came, because we wouldn't be here. And like I don't think that I mean, of course I wish there was no trauma, and I wish there was a lot of the things that happened didn't happen, but I don't wish my existence away. I think Métis people are so unique, specific to Canada, like that it happened for a reason. And I think that we are truly meant to kind of help bridge that gap for both sides and remind both sides that like there is an outcome that can result from, you know, coming together as one. And that's us.
Mahogany skin and braided hair, the smell of sweet grass in the air, and feathers floating everywhere. I've looked at native life that way, but now I see the darkness come. Residential schools and reservations. So many wars tribes should have won, but trusting their morals got in the way. I looked at native life with two eyes now, the ups and downs, but still somehow say I really don't know native life at all. Ships, fresh air, and beaver pad, the excitement of this new world you had fed. The native woman made your heart melt. I looked at settlers that way, but it was all just for show. Dying when you go. If you really love them, never let them know you must take their land away. I've looked at settlers from two eyes now, the ups and downs, but still somehow a white person can't be called, because they say I really don't know the white world at all. Sasha's floral patterns were Métis proud, following the dreams of Louis Hay, bridging the gap for the white and native crowd. I've looked at the world that way, but now it seems our relationship has changed. Neither world we can be claimed. Worlds I've lost, but culture I've gained. I live as a Métis today. I look at the world with both eyes now, the ups and downs, but still somehow perfect world just can't be called. I really don't know the world at all.
Where do you think like the future of Métis people are going to be in the next little while?
Yeah, this is something I'm so incredibly passionate about. Just because like culture constantly evolves and changes, and we are not the same people we were in the 1800s. Like, that's just not realistic. And like our language has changed, the way we look has changed, the way we dress has changed. And for me, the biggest thing is like I've been told by so many like knowledge keepers and elders that like our generation is the generation that will bring the culture back.
Has it been 100 years?
Yeah, right. And like for me, I think that's like really powerful because we're bringing it back, but we're also like modernizing it. So like you're seeing Métis women and well, anyone really. You're seeing Métis people wear that more traditional clothing, but they've modernized it to, you know, maybe wearing to the office every day, wearing their earrings, ribbon skirts, ribbon shirts. There's new like moccasins that are like literally there's like modern mocks that like you can wear to work and you look like a sleek Indigenous fool with your nice shoes on and stuff like that. And I think for me, like modernizing it's so important because that's how you make sure it doesn't die, right? Like if we were to keep everything how it was in the 1800s, like we were almost eradicated because of how we lived back then. So we can't let that happen again. So protecting it and bringing it in that new modern light and being the people who kind of modernize it and make it more well known and educate each other and integrate it in our everyday life, because our world has changed so much in the last like even 100 years that there's no way that we could not kind of adapt with the times right now. And I really love when I see other modern Métis who really like are proud of that, because I always say like, oh, that's real tradish, as kind of a joke, but it is really important to acknowledge that when people are like bringing those traditional elements into like modern day, through like social media, through fashion, through like your home life, your lifestyle, things like that, where I'm like, that's how you keep the culture alive and you live it every day.
I went to like a Métis business expo too, and it was like Métis people just owning regular businesses. I was talking to one guy who was like, oh, I was going to sign up like to have his business shown. And he's like, but I didn't like do any beading or anything. So I thought, and I was like, you don't have to do that to be Métis.
Yeah, you're modern Métis. I know. And like the way we raise our children, the way we live, like obviously, of course, I think a lot of Métis people feel really called to the land and they'd love to live like on a homestead of some sort and have land and acres. But also I know lots of Métis people who are like, I love living in the city. So I love having my garbage taken away for me, you know, and that's a modern Métis person.
Anything that you didn't say about like being Métis, or anything that like you feel like you really wanted to share? You can share it now or be silenced forever.
Being Métis, like it's so important to have a loud voice so we don't have that pan-Indigenous setting going on, because we are distinct and we are different. And just acknowledging that. Of course, we do have different teachings and different lifestyles and elements that we borrowed from our First Nations family and also our settler family. So that's why our culture is so unique, and what a beautiful blend. And there's no right or wrong answer to being Métis. So if you're a Métis person who's like never smudged in your entire life, perfect. If you're a Métis person who smudges every day, awesome. If you're a Catholic, great. If you believe in the creation story, great. Like literally we're so broad that there's no right or wrong answer. And I think that's why our community is so great, because we're all acknowledging that we are vastly different and that we all have unique and different experiences. So like I said, we're not going to be black and white. We're that mix of gray. So
find what you want to incorporate. That's what our ancestors did. Like when they first started, they're like, oh, like we're both these things. Like
this is kind of like off topic a little bit, but we had a presentation yesterday about like two-spirit people and how like two-spirit, the translation was it was like the person who like finds the balance. And then also the other translation was like the person who fights the most to prove they're the toughest. And it was so funny because I was like, one, that's totally two-spirit people. But two, like two-spirit people and Métis, we share a lot, especially like specifically Métis two-spirit people. I think they really, truly are all about balance. Like they really are walking in those two worlds and really understanding what it means to be both, but neither at the same time. And I think that's so cool. I think honestly, we have so much to learn from two-spirit people. I think we need to highlight them and you need to give them space, because that's who we're going to learn the most from, because they're getting it. They're getting it down. They're learning how to decolonize faster than anyone else. They're really setting an example and living in that like good way and in that balance, like better than anyone else I've ever met. So
I want to thank Nika for her insights on everything. Again, you can check out her interviews with Brianna Lizotte and Tegan Gaze on the Indigenous 150 Plus podcast. Speaking of musicians, you're probably thinking, Sam, that was an amazing conversation, but wasn't this episode supposed to be about Métis music? You're correct. But in order to understand Métis music and Métis musicians, it's important to learn about two-eyed seeing and the perspective that it brings to these artists. Being able to see multiple points of view has a direct impact on the music Métis people create. To discuss more about Métis music, I sat down with Juno-nominated musician Donny Parenteau.
How would you define Métis music if you could?
Métis music to me has always been, it's not so much Métis music, it's Métis feel is what I've always done. I always call it a feeling. It's a feeling that comes over you. And it comes right back to the way I look at it. I think back in the day when they used to when they came over on the wagons and the Red River carts from Red River all the way through to Saskatchewan, and all those evenings of sitting around a campfire. What did you do for entertainment? Well, they told stories, or they played music, and they told stories that meant something, and there was lots of feeling. So I've always found that even me as a songwriter, as a musician, as living my life, everything I do is always straight from the heart. It's straight to the point. And even as I said to you earlier, I don't prepare for interviews because it sounds too prepped. That's another Métis thing. I just like talking. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it. And that to me is the best way to explain it. It's not really Métis music, it's Métis feeling.
I wanted to talk a bit about like two-eyed seeing, and obviously that's something that a lot of people as Métis people may possess. Just like belonging to like the two different worlds. Do you think that has an effect on like Métis music, like the sound?
I think the effect that happened is because you blended those two cultures or whatever cultures together. It's all blended together, because when you're talking the First Nations opponent, there's where your rhythm comes from. Because if you think back as far, the first instruments ever played, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was a drum. And you need rhythm to have that. So when that rhythm is naturally in you because of that, and then now when you're mixing that with, it could be French, it could be English, it could be Scottish, you're mixing that with their cultures. Well, all of those cultures combine and they blend with the rhythm, and that's what makes Métis to me really cool. That's to me where it comes from. So really, the way I say it's not really just two different worlds, because some people are Métis and they have 5 different cultures that are in them combined.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a bit about the fiddle, because I think if someone doesn't know too much about Métis music, I think the fiddle comes to mind. What do you think is so special about the fiddle for like Métis people and the music?
I think the thing that a lot of people, what I don't want to portray is like when they say Métis music, and they always say they think of an old fiddle player playing by himself at a barn dance or something, and oh, that's very Métis. Man, I could pick up a guitar, I could pick up a mandolin or anything and turn it into Métis. It doesn't have to be just fiddle, because when you think back, when they first did the like I said, back to the wagon treks, back to the Red River carts, the instruments they brought on those trips were accordion, harmonica, juice harp. Somebody may have brought a guitar, and of course fiddle and spoons. So it wasn't just fiddle, but fiddle somehow rose to the top, and that's kind of the signature thing whenever you think Métis. It's with the fiddle. But there's a lot more to it than just the fiddle. But I think what it comes down to is when the fiddle gets played and how you're playing it and what you do. And I'm very fortunate. My mom always says you were blessed with a talent. And I look at it, but she says, never take that talent for granted, because it can be taken away as fast as you've got it. And that's what I've always done. So I take the talent that I have and I try to incorporate it. And something, just an example, when I play fiddle, that's where it's an extension of me. It's an extension of my body somehow, some way. And whatever I feel, I play. I don't know what I'm going to play. It just comes out of me. And people say, how do you do that? Like, how can you get up with a rock band? How can you get up with a blues band and just play and put fiddle into that? I said, you feel it. That's all it is. It's just a feeling. You don't think about it. It's like a golf swing. They say the worst thing you could do is think about your swing.
How did you get started, and what made you want to be a musician?
Well, there again, back when I was 5 years old, and in the Parenteau household, there was always music playing, not instruments, but music playing. My dad either had an 8-track on or he had a record player on. There was always music happening. And I think ever since I was a little kid, that's some of my first memories of listening to music. And I was brought up during a time too when it was okay to bring your kids to weddings and different functions. So kids got to go. And that's some of the first times I seen a live band. I remember being 5 years old, standing in front of this live band at a wedding, just fascinated with how they played, dancing by myself with little glasses on, dancing by myself in front of the band. because I just love the rhythm. I love that liveness, and that then it wasn't until I was about 12. It started with a guitar, and they had a guitar class in school, and you could basically take out a guitar like a library book signed. My family didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't have a guitar. So that was my first instrument that I really picked up and tried to learn how to play, besides school band stuff, right? But anyway, so what I found was I tried guitar for a while and absolutely loved it. But even backtrack just a little bit before that, my first instruments I played were baritone and trombone. And one year, the music teacher looks at me and she says, "Okay, read your music." I said, "I can't." She said, "What do you mean you can't? You've been playing it in class for like a year. How are you doing it?" And so I watched the guy beside me where his hand goes, listen, and I just do what he does. She said, "How can you do that?" And I said, "I can hear what he does and just imitate it. But I can't read the music." But I said, "I do have an ear for the music." So they tested us, and I was in 6th grade at the time. I went home that weekend, and a teacher said, "Everybody go home with your instrument and come back Monday. And when we have our class, play something that you heard on the radio." And I brought back my trombone, and I played Amazing Grace on the trombone. And that was it. I was the only student that could do it with no music. And she says, "Okay, you do have an ear." So from there, I went through junior high school, and I was, 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old is when I actually found the fiddle and took it out from underneath the bed, and it was broken on the side. And I asked my dad, and I said, "Can we take the fiddle and go get it fixed?" And it was a school night, and he said, "No." He said, wait 2 weeks." He said, "Then we'll go. Just give it a couple of weeks." I said, "But I want to go now. I want to go get it fixed. Old Mr. Ferguson can fix it. I know that." And my mom said, "Leave your dad alone." He said, 2 weeks. And I'm the baby of the family. So any babies of the family, when you're listening to this podcast, you know exactly what's coming next. Guess what I got? I got my way. And I went to see old Mr. Ferguson. He said, "Okay, come back in 2 weeks. The fiddle will be ready." So I went back in 2 weeks, opened up the case, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was just amazing. It felt so cool to see this. And all he did, he sat back and he showed me, showed me where to put my fingers. He said, first finger here, second finger here, third finger there, fourth finger there. He said, and just have fun with it. I went home and I had this song in my head. And I sat back and I was thinking, how does this go? And I started humming the song in my head. Then I stopped and I went, okay, wait a minute. How's that second half go? Not realizing now it's 11 o'clock at night. And I went into my dad's room and woke him up. And I said, "Dad," I said, "can you show me the second half of this fiddle tune?" He said, "It's 11 o'clock at night." He said, "Go see Mr. Ferguson tomorrow and get to bed. You got school in the morning." Okay. So away I go. Got home from school, took my fiddle, put it on my 10-speed bike, strapped it up with a bungee cord, and rode over to Mr. Ferguson's. And he says, "Everything okay with the fiddle?" And I said, "Yeah." But I said, "I want to play something for you." And he said, "What you got?" I played him that tune. And he said, "Who showed you that?" And I said, "I just heard it in my head." He said, "You have a natural talent. Don't ever stop playing. And this is your instrument. This is your outlet. You're going to get really good at that for how fast you're learning right now." So in the meantime, I tried signing up for lessons at a couple of different places. And they asked me, they said, "Do you know how to read music?" And I said, "No." They said, "Well, I recommend go to this person and learn how to read music first and then come back and see me." And I didn't like that. So I went, "That's okay. I'll learn on my own." And I did. Learned on my own until I'd meet the odd fiddle player and I'd go ask them for just advice or different tips, and they'd show me things. And I was a really quick learner. And George Piston was one of the first people to take me in under his wing and show me a lot of stuff. From there, it just built up to Brian Sklar was next. I was on the #1 West TV show with him. And then from there, I went on the road professionally to play when I was 19 years old. And then it took me around the world. And that's what I still do for a living.
Does like your Métis heritage and your culture sort of influence, and like what influence that plays, if any, into your music?
What I used to get lots when I was down in the United States, because I played with Neil McCoy, country artist, for 12 years. I traveled all over the world with him. And I'd run into a lot of different, First Nations people. I'd run into Cherokee, Sioux, Ojibwe people would come and watch shows. Everywhere we would go, we would run into them. And the first thing they'd always look at me and they would say, what kind of Indian do you have in you? What kind of native do you have in you? And I would tell them, and I said, I think it's a mixture, and they call it Métis. And they looked at me and they said, you need to embrace that and be proud of what you are and who you are. And I said, okay, because I was just being me, not realizing that, because you got to think this is back in the 90s. And you can ask anybody out there, when did it become cool to be Métis? In the mid 90s. And I'm not kidding you. And that's the truth, because I remember coming back in the mid 90s and some of the same people that used to call me half breed when I was a little kid, they're walking around wearing a Métis sash today. And that's why I've always looked at it this way. You are who you are. You don't need to label yourself. And if you're Métis, be proud of who you are, but just be a good person at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. So yeah, am I proud to be Métis? Hell yeah, I'm proud to be Métis. Because I know what my culture is now and I understand my culture. But when you go back to when I was a little kid and you didn't know, they didn't teach our culture in school. The only thing we ever knew is that there was a battle that took place in Batoche. And some of my ancestors fought in that battle. Not knowing why, I didn't know anything about it because we weren't taught. We were taught more about American history than we were Canadian history, and so when you're brought up in that, and then with kids can be brutal. They'll come up to you and they'll take one look at my dad, and my dad was dark and my mom was very fair. And they'd look and they'd say, well, you're a half-breed. Your dad's an Indian and you're white. That makes you a half-breed. And I went, and since that day, I don't like that word. I don't ever use that word. And you'll never hear me call anybody a half-breed. Never. Because I don't like it. It's just, if you're Métis, you're Métis. I mean, that word half-breed is it's a harsh title. I don't like it.
Like you said, we don't learn a lot about history, like Métis history particularly, and I guess Indigenous history just in general in Canada. That seems to be not in our history books. So it's, a lot of people don't understand terms like that or where it comes from and things like that. So they know the Cher song, I think, and that's pretty much it.
And the thing is, Samantha, is that I find in life, if you don't know about something, you're more liable to get picked on because they don't understand it and they don't know what it is. And then that's one thing I'm proud to do too, is I go talk to kids, and I did anti-bullying campaigns. I've talked to kids about inspiration, follow your dreams. Now I'm into talking to students about Métis music, teaching them how to play spoons and do things, but just to get that message to the kids, to let them know. And I would always ask the ones that did get bullied, why were you bullied? Well, they didn't like the color of my hair. So I'd always start every seminar with, everyone in this room looks different. Everybody. There's not one person in here that looks the same. Keep it that way. Because when you have a little group of friends, your little clique, that they say you have to do this to be part of this group. You have to change what you're doing now to become and be cool with us. You turn, and I said, and you run. You run away from those people. Those are not your friends. Your friends will take you for who you are. They'll take you for exactly who you are, and don't you ever change. Don't change for nobody. Especially
for people who are pursuing careers in the arts and things like that, you do want to be unique from everybody else and show off your unique abilities and sort of your unique perspective on the world. I was wondering if you wanted to talk about being an artist and maybe sitting down and when you're writing a piece of music, or just if there's anything that influences you to sort of want to create.
Everybody out there listening right now, this is my philosophy on writing. And I was taught this by a very good friend of mine, Sean Blackman, from Prince Albert. And he's another fellow musician. But he had told me that the way he looks at it, when you look at a piece of paper, it's and you look at building a song, it's like a blank canvas. And you're a painter. So what you're going to do, you're going to throw some color on that canvas, right? And that color is what we call the lyrics. You're creating ideas. You're telling a story. Tell me a story in 3 minutes. When people are trying to figure out how do you write a song, just look at a trailer. Look how they put that trailer together. They get the most important thing to get you because they're drawing you in. So now, having said that, go back to the blank canvas. You start adding color. Next thing you know, you have an image that shows up. Well, guess what that image is? That's your melody. Then eventually your melody, your lyrics start blending together and you create a piece of work. Now, sometimes you can end up with a painting, but the odd time, very rare, but you will end up with a masterpiece. You can sit back and say, I can't change nothing with this. There's nothing I would change with this song, nothing. And those are the beauty songs. I love doing those. But songwriting can be very simple if you let it. And the best advice I'd give anybody out there, if you want to try to write a song, you're just learning, how do I write a song? What do I do? Take a song that you already know. Something simple. I don't care what it is. Could be pop, it could be rock, could be anything. Go find the karaoke track to that song and make up your own lyrics. That's just a good exercise to try, just to learn. But remember, you got to tell a story.
The hardest part is, looking at that blank canvas, as you said.
Well, and that's the thing, Samantha. Trust me, I've looked at blank canvases for 2 or 3 days in a row and nothing's ever came. Nothing's ever happened. But when the influence hits, it'll hit. And when it does hit, I don't stop. I just go for it and I throw something down, and I always record my idea what I'm doing, because sometimes the worst thing that can happen is you'll come up with a cool idea, have a nice melody, and the next morning you wake up and saying, this doesn't, you look at the lyrics and say, where'd the melody go? Gone.
We talked a bit about the fiddle and sort of how that pertains to like Métis music. I was wondering if you wanted to discuss a little bit about how it's changed throughout the years, how we've gone from the Red River Jig to modern Métis music and seeing Métis people coming into the country music scene.
Well, to answer that question, what I found is that when you start out with the fiddle that I did, and then you graduate from the fiddle, and I'm not saying you'll ever put it down, but you get to a point in your life when I sat back and went, okay, I want to get better at another instrument. So I focused a lot more on guitar. Then I focused on the mandolin. And then I focused on other instruments, playing harmonica, just doing different things. But eventually it all came back to, why do I play these instruments? Create songs, to write songs. Because at the end of the day, to me, I could sit here and write you a fiddle tune all day long, but I would rather write you a song that can carry on for the rest of my life and maybe yours. So I absolutely love telling stories, and I like that's they come in my songs that way. Just basically telling a story. Sometimes it could be a very simple one, sometimes it could be complex. It doesn't matter, but it's always going to be blended with a feeling and special chords behind it and a melody to enhance what the story is. And that's, to me, is what's evolved from anyone that plays Métis music in the beginning and want to evolve into, say, a country music. See, with me, I started with fiddle and focused on fiddle tunes. Then I started focusing on when I was playing live in, across Canada in the bars when I was 19 years old, and I toured all across Canada. That was focused on learning how to play behind a singer. So that's how fiddle changed for me then. And when I started doing that, then I heard just like a whole new door open up. It's a whole new world. And when that happened, it went from there to now all of a sudden I'm singing more. And then I heard more songs, and all through the 90s, all through the Neil McCoy years, all the country artists that were coming through and the explosion, you learned how to write songs. And you learn how to tell those stories and piece it all together. And you just get better at your craft until you finally sit back and say, what do you really like doing? What's your most favorite thing to do? And when I get asked that question, I always tell them right off the bat, I will play fiddle till the day I die. And I'll be known as a fiddle player. But my songs will be absolutely timeless, because my songs are what's going to be left for my daughter. And one of the coolest things that ever happened to me is there's a very special song I wrote for Saskatchewan that's on my last album, and it's placed in a time capsule at the Regina Legislative Building to be reopened in 100 years. And my CD is the only one in there. So when they reopen that time capsule and pull out that CD 100 years from now, they're going to look at my name and say my name. And that to me, what more can a person ask for?
When you pick up someone's album and you put on their music, like I'm sure in 100 years people will be doing with yours, you really learn a lot about that person.
The coolest thing that happens is when you put yourself into your work and you write a song thinking this is about me. And then all of a sudden, a month later, after the song's released, you'll get phone calls or messages and saying, you wouldn't believe how much this song helped me through a tough time, or helped me through this, or that's my song. You're talking about me. And they take you on a different vision of what you really wrote about. Music is a universal language.
Do you think Métis musicians, they've sort of left this sort of imprint on maybe the country music industry in Canada?
I would look at how many Métis musicians are actually out there, not just playing country music, but playing rock, that can rap, that can do things. And they're Métis. It's just endless, the amount of music that can come from that culture. And to me, that makes me proud, because you've elevated yourself much farther than the way people look at Métis music as a fiddle player, like I said earlier, right? And once again, I'm not knocking fiddle players by no means, but just that's the way I want people to understand. That's how much Métis music has grown. It has grown way. It's surpassed leaps and bounds past where anyone ever thought Métis music's going to continue on and grow as far as someone's imagination will take it.
I interviewed Christy Belcour for another episode, and I asked her what is Métis art, and she's like, just a Métis person who makes their art. So I think that, yeah, again, applies to like music as well. Like Métis people don't have to be defined by the culture, or like you said, like a Métis person can be a rapper, they can go do rock, heavy metal. Like you don't have to, pigeonhole yourself to like, oh, you're Métis, like you must play the fiddle. And I was like, no, I'm a rapper.
Exactly.
Because you also teach music. So I was wondering how like important that is to sort of like pass down your knowledge about Métis music, but just pass down your knowledge of music in general, and how important that is in your life.
Absolutely, it is. And I do that to all of my students. I teach them as best I can and just try to encourage them to do the best they can. And I always tell them, like every student that I have, you're only going to get out of it what you put into it. And and I said the same rule applies to life. So everything that I teach them, to me, has always been a little bit more than just music. I also give them life tips every now and then, or if they come in and they're sad, I try to dig and find out what's going on, even though it might not be none of my business, but that's not my personality. I love helping people. And if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, I do it. And I tell all my students too, I'm not teaching you music just for the sake of saying that you look back on your life when you're older and, yeah, I used to take lessons a long time ago, but I don't play anymore. I don't like hearing that. I want you to keep playing. Keep playing. It's there again, like I said earlier about golf. If you love golf, go play. Go play. Doesn't mean you have to be great. You're not making money doing it. You're just doing it for the love of it and having fun. Same thing with music. Exact same thing. So as I said earlier, as far as teaching, I do have some students who are Métis in culture. And one of the first things we always try to build up to is the Red River Jig, especially when it comes to fiddle players. But it's as I said, to me, Métis music and the Métis style of playing has always been a feel, more so than saying this is Métis music. Like, I don't think anybody could ever sit down and write something down and say, this is Métis music here. Because even though I'm looking at the music right now in front of me by a well-known Métis fiddle player, Andy Desjarlais, I'm looking at one of his fiddle tunes right now as we speak. And I'm looking at the tune and I'm thinking, how many people can play those notes the exact same way, but only one person could feel it the way he wrote it, and that's Andy. That's his feelings. He felt that and wrote it. So for you to feel it the way he did, it's going to be pretty tough to do because there was only one. There was only one Andy DeJarlis. So what I encourage students to do too, learn how to play your own stuff. Become individual the way you play. Don't imitate people. You imitate people in the beginning because you're learning your craft, and that's fine. But when you want to develop your own style, stop listening to other people and just play yourself. Play straight from the heart and go. And you will develop your own style.
There you have it, folks. Métis people are hooked on a feeling. See what I did there? Anyway, it was a great opportunity to sit down with Donny to discuss his experience as a Métis musician, and we'll leave a link to his website in the show notes so you can check out his music or even take a few classes. But first, we need to talk about the fiddle in the room. We spent a lot of time in this episode talking about modern Métis music, but I do want to go back to the very beginning, the story of the Red River Jig, and that is the subject of today's episode of Métis on the Roof.
A Métis on the roof? Sounds crazy, no? But here at the Red River, you might say every one of us is a Métis on the roof, playing a fiddle, an instrument that was brought here by our European ancestors. If you listen carefully, you may notice the sound is different from any other fiddle playing that you've heard before. And how did we create this sound? That I can tell you in one word. Tradition. Because of our traditions, we have been able to survive for many, many years. Here in the Red River, we've got traditions for everything. We have our sash, we bead, we hunt and fish. For instance, we have one song that is the unofficial anthem of the Métis. You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you, I don't know. There are a few stories of a young fiddler in a canoe with men out on the hunt. And what was this fiddler doing riding in this canoe? The scratches of his fiddle were used to keep the rowers in time with one another. When he arrived on land, our fiddler's job was done. He had nothing to do but sit and wait where the Red and the Assiniboine rivers meet.
All right, everyone ready?
Not you, Louie.
You better stay back and keep your fiddle company.
I wonder what he does while we're off hunting.
Last time we came back, he was talking to the thing.
I saw him kissing it.
I wasn't kissing it. I was shining it. I swear.
Don't mind them, Louis. You play an important role.
Sure.
It's true. That canoe is so small, if we didn't have your music to guide us, these big buffoons would be rolling in circles, tipping us over. It's your fiddle music that allows us to work as one. We'll see you in a bit. All right, men, let's head out.
Yeah, ladies, stay here.
See you later, Louise. Because he's a girl.
There they go. I might not be strong enough to take down a buffalo, or a deer, or a fly. But hey, it takes a lot of strength to hold this fiddle. I'd like to see them try and play any tune on this thing. That's what I was going to say. Next time. It's just you and me, buddy. What was that? Must have just been the wind. Or an animal in distress? Hello? Maybe I should get the others. They are stronger. No, Lewis. This is your time to prove yourself. Who's out there? I have a fiddle and I'm not afraid to use it. Who's over there? On the other side of the river? Who are you? What are you playing?
Filled with joy and pride, our fiddler brought this new sound home for his fellow Métis to enjoy, creating a new sound and song, the Red River Jig.
That's the end of our show, folks. Thank you to our audience for listening. Once again, I am your host, Samantha Loney. I want to thank our guests, Nika Pazuik and Donny Parenteau, for sharing their knowledge with us, and Etienne Beausoleil for providing the music in this episode. This episode was written and directed by Samantha Loney, edited by Cassidy Villebrun Baracus, and produced by the Métis and Me program with support from our sponsors, the Barrie South Simcoe Métis Council, along with the City of Barrie. See you on the road as the next episode of the Traveling Métis podcast continues on our artistic journey to learn all about Métis storytelling. See you down the river, and remember to like and subscribe.